everybody, and welcome to today's very special video. Today we have a testimony, and it is an incredibly special one, close to my heart, because as you'll soon find out, this testimony is from a client who is a dear friend of mine. Daryl and I have been friends for many years, and when she reached out to me to help her on her trying to conceive journey, I was honored. Her and her husband are two young, healthy people. They never expected to have any issues with starting a family. And so when it wasn't going as they imagined, they reached out to me and we dug deeper to find where their hiccups were, what were the missing pieces. We found how to explain their unexplained infertility, and now they're expecting a baby in January of 2021, and I cannot be more excited for them. So please enjoy the upcoming testimony with Daryl, and I hope you enjoy and find inspiration. And during the testimony, and even after the testimony, feel free to comment below and ask questions, ask for clarification, or even if you're comfortable, ask about your journey. Now remember, I am a functional fertility dietitian, but I am not your functional fertility dietitian. So I can't answer specific questions regarding labs or supplements or things like that, but general questions are always welcome. If you would like to learn how to become a client so I can answer these questions for you, then you want to subscribe below and also grab the link to my website that's below. There you'll find program offerings and also a link to schedule a free discovery call. I do this for all new clients because functional fertility takes a commitment both on your end and my end as your practitioner. So we want to make sure that we're the right fit for each other. So please enjoy the testimony, and also if you have questions or want to learn more information, grab the website link below. Hi everybody, and welcome to a testimony time. Testimony time at Let's Get Real RD for Functional Fertility. If you don't know me, my name is Olivia, and I am the founder at Let's Get Real RD and Functional Fertility Dietitian. And I'm so excited to talk to a very special woman today. Her name is Daryl. So Daryl, thank you for joining us.
For sure, absolutely.
Can't wait to hear about your journey and where you're at. Well, actually, just tell us where you're at with your pregnancy right now. How far along are you, and how are you feeling?
So currently I'm in my second trimester and feeling amazing compared to where I was.
Yes.
Everyone said that the second trimester was magical, and I highly doubted them until I got here. I was like, I don't believe you.
I love it. You're always such a you're just a realist, I feel. You're even keel about many things. So I love that you went into it just being like very skeptical, and we're pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. So it's the whole time I've just been very grateful, but I'm definitely extra grateful right now.
Awesome. I love that. And I do want to say a little caveat too, before we get going. Daryl and I are actually friends. We went to college together. And so just want to make sure that everyone knows we may talk very comfortably with each other. And of course, we get close over a program that, anyone working together always like to form a healthy and good relationship with people I work with. But Daryl's a special one because we already had a relationship before we worked together. So, but let's dive right in. So really, Daryl, why don't you just start telling people a little bit about your trying to conceive journey and why you decided to pursue a functional fertility program?
Sure. So, my husband and I started trying to conceive about a year after we were married. So immediately after coming off the pill, I just knew that I wasn't feeling great. Right? Like I had like crazy mood swings, it just like really bad headspace, just like all of these kind of emotions and like mental places that was not me, that is not me. And just on top of just like feeling generally terrible. And I thought, like this kind of is probably to be expected. I need to just like ride this out a little bit. I can't expect my body to just like bounce back right away. So I rode that out for about the summer. I went off, I guess, in like June and rode out through the summer. And by the end of the summer, I was just still feeling terrible, and I was starting to get frustrated because I thought, there is no way that I can feel this terrible and have my body be in a place where it could support a pregnancy. Like I'm not a doctor, but I kind of figured that I could put those pieces of the puzzle together. And so that's when I reached out to Olivia, just because I'm lucky enough to know her as a friend and know her, what she's into and what she's really knowledgeable about. And I'm trying to figure out how to word this. Like, I think I reached out to you initially because I knew there was something wrong. Mm-hmm. And I knew that if I went into to my doctor, that I would be told that I should just be waiting a year, and I thought, I know there's something wrong now. I know I'm not in an excellent place now. I don't see why I need to wait a year before we start looking into these problems and seeing what we can fix, right? And I remember calling you and just being like, how do I know if there's a problem? Because you can go to the doctor and my dog's popping in. So, you can go to the doctor and you say that your arm hurts and get an x-ray, or, you can go to the doctor and, say some sort of ailment, and they have 1,000 different tests. And it just frustrated me that I couldn't go to the doctor and be like, something's wrong with me inside, and yes. they won't test you for that. Right. So I reached out to Olivia, who recommended the fertility awareness method. Yes. Yeah. But what's the book called?
Taking Charge of Your Fertility.
Yes. Yeah. Which blew my mind. I definitely recommend picking up a copy of that, no matter
step number one. Step number one.
Yeah.
It said, start there.
Yes. So that blew my mind. And Olivia had said, why don't you just chart for about 2 or 3 months and kind of see where things are at? That really is a test, right? Mm-hmm. And so I charted for about 3 months, and it was so obvious from my charts that something wasn't right, that, things were not ideal. So when I reached back out to Olivia at that point, I was, to be very transparent, I was very skeptical of the entire process. I knew what your focus was all about. I was very aware of what we were going to kind of get into, and I thought, well, I don't know what else I have to lose, because the alternative is I wait a year, and worst case scenario, after a year, I walk into a fertility clinic. And, for those that a fertility clinic is the option, mm-hmm. That's awesome. That's such a blessing. But I didn't want that to have to be plan A.
Yep.
So that's kind of how we started together.
Incredible. I mean, there's so much to unpack there. And so first I want to say, for people who haven't heard of Taking Charge of Your Fertility, I will link to that below. Like Daryl said, I mean, number one, start there. It teaches you fertility awareness method. We also learn this in my fully functional courses. But if you just want to take a step on your own, get that book, order it from Amazon, and start charting just like Daryl did. And really, you have a lot more questions that you can then pursue. You can ask your doctor about, or you can ask another practitioner about, or you have information. Did you feel like that gave you some control over your journey?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Because then I felt like, even before we started working together, it actually gave me the tools beyond those free apps on our phone, right? Yep. That say this is your optimal time for conception. And for me, it ended up kind of being about the same, but I know for a lot of people, it probably really isn't the case. And it was also just it was so encouraging and I guess empowering to be able to see it right there, in my body's signs. Okay, I really can track this just myself.
Yes.
It totally. Definitely gave me a lot of control. All the control. Yeah.
Amazing. And I think that's a huge part of trying to conceive journey for a lot of people is a lot of it feels out of our control, right? It's like, well, why isn't it working? I don't know. I don't know where to start. And then I've kind of coined this as the fertility gap. And I feel like a lot of couples fall into the gap where you start, you try, it doesn't, go like we're taught it does. You have sex, you get pregnant. Right? I mean, like, what's the problem? But when it doesn't happen that way, there's not much help. There's not much information in this gap. And then, like you mentioned, a lot of times you go to your doctor and let's talk fertility treatments, right? And so this gap is a really great place where we can get a lot in that general time of 12 months that we're told to try to conceive for, right? And then go back to your doctor. And so you took advantage of that time and really started to bridge that gap with things like learning how to track your cycle with fertility awareness method, and then some other things that we're going to get into to talk about your specific journey. And so, but I want to take a step back and talk a little bit about, birth control. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because there's a lot of resources out there for this if people are curious about it. But when we have birth control, again, not against birth control, like not against, fertility treatments, anything, but there are some consequences of birth control that a lot of women aren't aware of. And when we come off of birth control, like you said, just not feeling like yourself. You knew something was there. You knew something was going on. How long did it take? I think you said like 3 months before you reached out there?
Yeah, I think it was almost 3 months to be exact, because I just felt like I knew that I immediately, when I immediately wasn't feeling awesome, and really like awesome is sarcastic, I was feeling terrible. I knew that it was almost to be expected, right? Yeah. I'm pumping my body full of artificial hormones, and now I'm suddenly just taking them away in a moment. I know even, from being on birth control the years that I was, when you miss a couple pills and you have to double up, or like, God forbid, like the days you have to triple up, right? Like, I knew that just when I had to do that, I felt awful the next day, or maybe the next couple days after, right? So it was about 3 months later that I just felt like there were just all these things that were still persistent. And like you said, it was like that information gap where I knew that I needed to do something. Like if something wasn't working and something wasn't right, but I didn't know. I guess I didn't have the tools to be able to figure out, like, well, is really something wrong, or is this all just in my head and part of the process? And I think that's when I initially reached out to you, like I had kind of said something along the lines of like, I want this to be an enjoyable experience, like I want this to be a good time in my life. And I felt like I couldn't enjoy it until I had all of the knowledge and all of the data on paper that said, yes, everything's okay. It's okay to enjoy the process.
Amazing. Yeah, that's really powerful right there. And I think, that part, it should be enjoyed. I mean, this is such an exciting time in a couple's life, right? And to kind of give over, I feel like oftentimes couples feel that they're like handing over the reins. A lot of times when we go into our doctors, first of all, again, it's not that going to your doctors is not a good idea. Like, obviously, doctors are critical and they're very brilliant people and we need them. But unfortunately, especially with women's health, there's a huge deficit. Like you mentioned, like, is this all in my head? What is going on? I don't really know how to, like, what test to ask for, what direction to go. Unfortunately, a lot of women are not turned away, but kind of dismissed at the doctors. And maybe even we think and we begin to believe that maybe this is all in my head. Maybe, like, I don't know, maybe I am depressed, or maybe I'm just kind of making this up. Maybe I'm not feeling bad. Maybe I should just deal with it. Is this how I'm supposed to feel, right? Yeah, like, maybe you're supposed to feel crappy. And unfortunately, there's, again, a gap. That's part of that fertility gap. And so, and then the birth control piece of that, I wanted to kind of roll that into a little bit about digestion and about how that affects the absorption of certain nutrients. So we know birth control can actually deplete critical nutrients that are needed for fertility. Some of these things are folate and B12 and magnesium and zinc. And we had actually, in your specific case, Daryl, we really talked a lot about digestion, right? And building up kind of that maybe depleted nutrients and making sure you're absorbing nutrients, because you're a healthy eater. You were at the beginning of this. You took care of yourself. I mean, generally, like, you were a very healthy woman, and you knew, right foods to eat. But pillar number one of any of my fertility programs actually begin with what is called the non-negotiables. And digestion is one of those non-negotiables. And this is exactly why. Tell us a little bit, Daryl, about your experience with like digestion and how focusing on that non-negotiable piece first really set you up for success as we went through your program and tailored more protocols for actually conceiving.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that, like, my kind of struggle with digestion started even before we even realized it, like 20 years ago. I had gone through most of my life with an undiagnosed severe allergy to gluten. It could be celiac disease. It could just be a really severe allergy. I never did the test. I just eventually got to a place in my life where I cut it out about 10 years ago and noticed this significant difference and decided I would never go back.
Incredible.
But I really think that, it was 20 years that I ate gluten, and for about, 5 or 6 of those years, I knew that I had an allergy, but just didn't really have the tools to be able to make the switch. It's, like, it was back before being gluten-free was very cool and in, and there wasn't a whole lot of, like, actual good food to eat. But that's besides the point. I really think that, like 20 years of eating food that my body and my gut couldn't correctly digest really did some damage, right? And then a couple of years after going off of gluten, I went on birth control, which also isn't fantastic for your gut and for your digestion. And I just think that the two worked really well together to just, like, create a perfect storm, right? Yeah. Yeah. So when I started working with you, we started talking about, like, eating a lot of different fermented foods and a lot of, like, really, like, foods for specific for gut health. And I really, like, dialed in on a lot of those foods. What else? We also did the HCL challenge. Yeah. And to be honest, when I tell people about all the changes and all, like, our protocols that we did, that was the hardest part of this entire process. Okay. For me, I was on the HCL challenge for, like, we were together for about 6 months. I was on the HCL challenge for about 5 or 6 months.
Yeah. And for people that don't know what the HCL challenge is, let me say this real quick. I'll give you a little rundown. Basically, HCL stands for hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid is the digestive power that's found in our stomach. If we don't have enough of it, then we aren't really digesting our food properly, and therefore we're not absorbing nutrients, right? So you could be eating all the healthy food you want, taking all the great supplements you want, but if you're not actually digesting them, then a lot of times you're just basically peeing out really expensive urine because you're not absorbing those prenatals or that CoQ10 or that vitamin D. And so the HCL challenge is the idea of supplementing with HCL. And you begin, it's titrated, it's customized to your individual needs. You begin with 1 capsule at every meal, and then you increase by 1 capsule at every meal until you complete the challenge. And that has to do with feeling a certain thing in your digestion, and we go over that in your protocol. And so basically, Daryl, how many did you get up to?
Oh my gosh, I think I was at, like, 16 each meal. So I was taking 16 of these, like, horse capsules, I call them. They're pretty large capsules.
Yes.
Yes. At each meal. And I just remember thinking, like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is never going to end. And like, I would do it for 2 weeks and then take a week off, and then do it for 3 weeks and take a week off. And I just felt like every other week I was on Amazon, like, ordering more, like, oh my God.
Totally.
But, it made such a difference. It was insane. Once I finally got to a point where I was taking like 1 capsule per meal, I noticed like my, even just the small things, like my fingernails had always had these like really crazy, nasty, like gnarly ridges to them. Like, all of a sudden I looked down, I was like, whoa, like, they're gone. And there were so many other just really small things that were different, that were so small that I had never realized that they were a problem to begin with, And once I got to the end of that challenge, I turned around and went, oh my gosh, like, that has always been normal for, 30 years. And now it's not a thing anymore.
Right. I love that. I love that experience. And was one of those things GERD? Did you have heartburn issues as well? Or did I make that up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and this is a really common misconception, is that GERD or heartburn is due to too much stomach acid, when in reality, oftentimes it's not enough. And so what Daryl did is she basically filled her cup, if you will, or her stomach or digestive power. She increased that so that she was then able to wean off of those. It's not a forever thing, thankfully. And she was able to wean off of that and see the difference in her outwards, appearance, in her fingernails, for example. That is huge, because it takes a long time for nutrients to, 6 months, as she mentioned, it takes a long time for nutrients to actually, be absorbed better and change the way that our fingernails are growing, right? And so that's huge. And now, to have that built, that's why pillar number 1 is called rebuild your foundation, because that's literally what you did, right? You rebuilt the way that your body tolerates and digests and utilizes foods that you're eating.
Yeah.
And so that, I think, is super powerful. And even though it was and I tell people straight up, like, it's annoying, like, it sucks. I do it too. I had to do this too. And especially if your stomach acid is so low that you have to really keep at it for a while. But when it's taking a while, when we have to take that many capsules, that's an indication that it's a really big issue that needs addressed, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this is just an example of that gap. This would not be done otherwise. History of birth control, a history of possibly undiagnosed celiac or gluten intolerance, taking a toll on gut health and nutrient absorption. That's really important. And that's a huge part of, I think, how Daryl's story was changed, but would not have, unfortunately, been addressed likely otherwise.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And so I just love hearing that. I love hearing your perspective on that, and talking about gut health and how that's so critical as a non-negotiable. And so, it was annoying to do that challenge. And there were other things, that we go through a lot. Like, we talk about exercise, we talk about, of course, nutrition, supplementation, gut health, fatigue. That can be a big indication of poor absorption. Mm-hmm. So you were literally a rock star at implementing these things, and you did it, and you stuck through it. What recommendations would you give people, or tips for implementing these changes? Number 1, without getting overwhelmed, or number 2, with, I think, just maybe having confidence and faith in what your journey is and what you're going through.
Yeah, that's a hard question.
Do your best.
What did I do? So
it could just be an attitude thing. It could just be talking with your partner and involving them. I know that's, a very, very important part of the process too. Asking questions with me. What did you find was most helpful for you?
For sure. So at no point did I ever feel overwhelmed. I think that's really important. And I know some people probably will, but at no point did I ever feel overwhelmed, just because so before I started with Olivia, I I'm an information person, right? Like I love to read, I love to learn, I love to know, I need to know everything about the thing that I'm doing. Yeah. So before I started with Olivia, I was on Google, I was looking at, just for example, like detoxifying your lifestyle, right? Like the cleaning products and the beauty products and all things like that. I was like dedicating a lot of hours online to just figure out like good brands and things to buy and things to get rid of and stuff like that. And then once I started with your program, I decided, all of my extra Googling was done. Wow. That I was going to take the information you were giving me and nothing more, and doing what you were telling me to do and not worrying about the rest. Because I figured, like, you're the expert and I'm going to let you guide me along, and I kind of figured part of being with you is the added benefit that I don't have to worry about all the extra stuff, right? You're going to tell me the important stuff. So, like when I kind of stopped all my research and all that detoxifying stuff, and then we eventually got there, and you gave me all the tools to be able to tackle that. And I think just like I really approached our program with the idea that this is going to sound very silly, especially if you're not like a runner or if you're not someone who kind of likes that kind of thing. But when we started trying to conceive, I had just finished with a really rigorous training cycle, kind of because I knew that my body would likely not be able to support a pregnancy or conception doing the kind of training that I was doing. I just figured I needed to back things down while we were trying. And so once we started trying, I backed things down. And then once I started with Olivia, I kind of thought, I'm going to stop altogether. Like I need to, like what I'm doing with Olivia is going to take a lot of time, because it did. Mm-hmm. And it took a lot of discipline and a lot of like planning and forethought and everything. And I thought, like I'm already doing all of that in training. So why don't I just stop the training, right? And look at what I'm doing with you as a whole different training cycle, if that makes sense, right?
I love that. Yeah.
Like I was like, like I'll always have running. Like running will be there, after babies, between babies, like it'll always be there. But like for right now, like this is the new thing that needs to have all of my time and attention, Yeah. And then I figured as long as I was disciplined in our program, no matter if it worked or not, because like I said, like I went into it very skeptical, but I thought I don't want fertility treatments to be plan A, I want this to be plan A. So I figured that it was worth my best shot, that I would give it like absolute 110%. And if it didn't work in the end, at least I knew that I was coming out of it a healthier person, right? Exactly. And was setting myself up for hopefully better success if fertility treatments were going to be a thing, Yep. And I think I wanted to go through your program and know that like I did it, like I gave it a fair shot.
I hear that so often, actually. I hear one woman actually use the phrase, "It felt like a leave no stone left unturned approach."
Yeah.
Is that similar? Is that kind of like okay, yeah. And I love that. And I love hearing that from you too. It's such amazing feedback and such a great, I think, perspective on it. And as you mentioned, really it's a win-win, because whether natural conception is right for you or not, you still come out healthier. You still come out with a changed body, so that going into fertility treatments, if that's your path, then you are set up for success in that as well.
Yeah.
So it's pretty incredible. And actually there was a new study that just came out, and they had said takes an average of 3 IVF cycles for a couple to conceive. That's an average $15,000 to $30,000 a pop. Okay. When making appropriate dietary and lifestyle and supplementation changes before, takes about at least minimum 3 months, you can improve, or you can drop the average of 3 tries in half.
That's crazy.
So, I mean, like, it's really, really powerful. But again, that gap, oftentimes, you know, it falls within that fertility gap, and there's no changes between starting to try infertility treatments. And so you took the best advantage of that gap possible, and you really changed your story from, you know, square one, which is very powerful. So what other tips would you have for a woman or a couple who are like you, starting out, trying to do this all on their own, going to Google, figuring all of that out? What tips would you have if they're at that point right now? What would you tell them?
So I've actually talked to a couple of other people about the, you know, just they started to strike me as people who were in the same place as I was, like 3 months in, you know, and kind of wanting answers and wanting to know if what they were doing was going to work. You know, they just kept trying and kept, you know, running the course. And of course, I recommended you, like, immediately, you know, but I said, you know, like, I think that everybody's journey is their personal decision, right? Like, there's a right journey for everybody. And what was really, really perfect for me maybe isn't for everybody.
Yep.
But I just felt like working with you gave me all the tools I needed to feel like I was doing something to help us.
Yeah.
You know, it really made me feel empowered about what we were doing, and that we had actual control over the whole outcome of the situation. So I think that's my recommendation, that, you know, if someone's in a place where they're feeling like they want that, then I think reaching out to you or a functional practitioner is what you need to do.
Yep. Or buy the book.
Exactly.
Buy the book. Just start there. Like, just start there and see if that resonates with you, and see if fertility awareness method and learning that and charting for a few months, see what information that gives you, and then go from there. And then you even have, you know, if you want to continue on your own path, like, honestly, you have better questions to ask. You have better questions to Google if you still are going to Google, but you also have a much better, I think, understanding of what you could potentially be working on and improving with someone who can walk you through that as well.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, because seeing those charts and actually seeing the issues on paper. Now, I didn't know what the issues were, or what was causing what I was seeing. Yeah. But I think that really helped. That was the kind of the kick in the pants that I needed to really reach out and say, I want to start a formal program with you.
Totally.
Because I saw on paper that there was actually a problem.
Right. And I think that's a really critical point as well, is that we live in a world of information, right? I mean, never ever have we lived in a world where we can pull up our phone and, you know, ask the internet anything. And that's powerful. Like, that's amazing, but it can also be overwhelming, and it can also, you know, those aren't customized to you, right? Like, yeah, it's information, and I would never tell anyone not to do that. But there comes a point, and I hear this very often, where women and couples are like, well, I know everything. I feel like I have all the information, but I don't know what's right for me. Or, like, I don't know where to start. It's just too much. And I think that can be a place where you really want to consider, you know, stop and think about what direction you want to pursue and put your energy and time into that. Like, you had to kind of migrate over your commitment from a running program to a fertility program. Yeah. And you made that commitment, and you decided that that's where you're going to put your energy. And thankfully.
Yeah.
Definitely. One other question was the Dutch test. So I want to talk a little bit about that. The Dutch test, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is the advanced hormone test that I use in my practice. It's not a Dutch heritage test. It doesn't test for that. It's an acronym that stands for Dried Urine Test for Comprehensive Hormones. And if you already think, well, I have hormone testing done at my doctor's, unfortunately, it's not the whole picture. I have other recordings about the Dutch test. You can go back and look at those. But Daryl, tell us your experience. Did you find the Dutch test helpful, first of all?
100%. Yes.
Awesome.
I think doing the test was, it was, a piece of cake. It was super, super easy. I said like that was a non-issue. And not only that like I really wanted to do the test because I really wanted us to, like you said, like there's so many recommendations out there, but how do you know which ones are actually right for your problems and, like the issues that you're seeing? And I really wanted, I think that was part of the piece that I needed. I knew it was part of the piece I needed to buy into whatever recommendations you were going to tell me. Yeah. Because I wanted to know that there's this issue and Olivia is recommending these 3 specific things for that, right? Yep. And when we got my Dutch results back, and we spent that session like going through everything, right? All of the issues you were seeing and all of that. I remember, you asked me, you said, okay, like at the end, like, how are you feeling? Like, are you okay? And I almost feel like you asked it as like that was a lot of bad news. Like, how are you feeling? And I was so happy.
Yeah.
Like, I was so relieved.
Answers.
Yes. Like, because I just kept saying the whole time that I was doing the test, like that month-long process, I just kept saying, like, I hope this shows big problems, or not big problems, but I just hope this shows problems, because nobody wants to be a medical mystery, you know?
Yep.
And so at the end, I was like, I only have one question. I was like, the issues that you just explained, do you remember this?
I do. And it was such a great question.
I was like, do the issues that you're seeing that you just explained, do they explain why conception hasn't been possible yet? And I remember you said like 100%. Absolutely, these explain, what we're going through, or what I'm going through right now.
I get so excited.
But it was just like, it was so validating, to be like, okay, there's issues, but now I know these issues when I'm working with somebody who knows how to fix them, you know?
Yeah, and the Dutch test, guys, just so you know, it is an at-home test. It's a urine collection. You pee on paper and you send it in. Super easy, like Daryl said. And second point there is, like, I think this is where that unexplained infertility diagnosis, I think that I have trouble with it, because to me it's a blanket diagnosis. It's covering a bunch of things that have not been looked into yet. And so when people have this unexplained infertility diagnosis, which usually comes after 12 months of trying to conceive, which again, why wait 12 months? And if you're over 35, it's 6 months of trying to conceive. But there are explanations. There are ways that we can explain it. And like you said, getting negative test results back, or getting whatever test results back that show there's something to work on, is actually really relieving. I think that can be because it's an answer, and it's something that we can work to improve, to change the outcome. And so the Dutch test is incredible at doing that. And of course we did other testing, and a lot of it was normal too. A lot of it, we saw a few things that may, touch on or maybe improve, maybe that were in normal range, but not optimal range, which is also air quotes that I always have tried to distinguish between. But yeah, so I'm so happy that we did find information in the Dutch test to really zero in on and help to explain that world of, like you said, like nothing's wrong technically, like there's no overarching issue that we can point to. We got to dive deeper, and that's what Dutch test allows us to do, really. So excellent. And I think my last question would be, overall, would you say that a functional fertility approach for your fertility helped you? I think we already answered it, but really with the emotional piece, because I talk a lot about, obviously the goal, and it's trying to conceive or improve chances of IVF or other fertility treatments. We talked about the idea of just having more power and control over the journey. How do you think that helped you emotionally through it? Because that's a huge part that we can't forget about. The emotional piece of this is huge. And with your husband and with the whole process, how do you feel like, or do you feel like that helped? And if so, how?
Absolutely. I think it gave us reassurance that we actually had a chance. I think is really what was most beneficial, and helped us the most. That even if with each month that if things were negative, and it was not the news that we were hoping for. I think we both were able to just be like, okay, but I'm still in the midst of like this freaking HCL challenge that won't end, and like we make fun, but like until I finished that, I knew I wasn't properly absorbing nutrients, and my body wasn't going to do anything crazy until it had the nutrients, right? So like with each month that we didn't have that ideal news, we both were like, okay, but I've only been implementing these changes for 2 months or 3 months, or and it was, I'm trying to kind of quick time things out, but February, March, April. So it was exactly 3 months after we had implemented kind of like our final round of changes, right? That we got the news we've been hoping for. And so yeah, I think it just it gave us a lot more hope, because we were doing things actively to help us.
Love that. Hope is such a powerful piece of it. I mean, it's huge. So I'm really happy to hear that. Very happy. Is there anything else that you feel like you want to include? We covered a lot, and thank you for sharing your story and your journey and being so open, because I think that's also, why I like to do these testimonies or these conversations is just to talk about it. I think a lot of couples, it's a touchy subject, and we don't know when to open up or when to keep going on our own or when to power through. And so I just thank you and have such gratitude and respect for the way that you have gone through the entire process and were willing to speak about it. And do you have any last minute thoughts or wisdom nuggets or anything that you would like to throw out there for someone that may be on the fence about maybe reaching out for help?
Not really. I really feel like I've
covered it all.
Yeah, all the things that have been on my mind the past 6 months. I think it was a life-changing process, and I think even if we hadn't been able to naturally conceive through your program, we would have come out of it with a whole new lifestyle perspective, so I don't think there was nothing to lose. So
amazing. Great. Well, thank you for sharing that, Daryl. And thank you for your time and just your commitment to your body and the health of your family and your future family. I mean, it really does. You mentioned it before, it's like not, and I say that it's not for everybody. It's not. It takes commitment. It takes change. It takes willingness to kind of rethink how we've been doing things and rearrange our schedules. And, so it isn't for everybody, but I thank you for giving me the chance to work with you and help to change your story.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Daryl. And any links that I mentioned will be in the bottom here. And thank you guys for joining. We'll catch you next time.